Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our Friday weekly Lunch and Learn. Every Friday at noon, Sierra Club Iowa chapter goes live to give you an important environmental update. And we have some big legislative updates related to the carbon pipelines for you. So I'm going to share my screen and let's get started because things are moving fast. So we're going to talk about carbon pipeline and the legislative session. This is our fifth legislative session at the Capitol working on this issue. And over those 5 years, dozens of bills addressing the carbon pipelines have been introduced with varying degrees of success. But last year in 2025, House File 639 passed both chambers and then was vetoed by Governor Reynolds. This was a huge disappointment, and Governor Reynolds said, "I want a clean bill with no unintended consequences." So we went to work over the past year to put together a clean bill with no unintended consequences that we can pass to finally solve this crisis with the carbon pipelines and property rights. Now, we worked really hard on this bill between the session and just in the last 5 years, and our bill is moving very fast. It's House File 2104, and we'll tell you what's in it here in just a minute. But this bill was introduced on day one, passed out of subcommittee on day two, passed out of the House Judiciary Committee on day three, and then out of the full House on this Wednesday, which is week 2 of the session. This shows that we've built a lot of power and we've made this a legislative priority. But we have to continue to be loud and even louder this legislative session if we want to make this bill become a law. So, House File 2104, which was formerly House Study Bill 507. This bill is simple, it's clean, it's only one sentence long. You can see there what's highlighted. And it simply removes the threat of eminent domain for carbon pipelines. It doesn't stop carbon pipelines. It just says you can't use eminent domain for carbon pipelines, which gives Iowans the right to say yes or no. And so the language of the bill says, notwithstanding any other provision of law, a person shall not exercise the power of eminent domain to acquire right-of-way for, construct, or operate a pipeline for the primary purpose of transporting carbon oxide. So short, simple, clean. Should be exactly what the governor asked for, and it solves the major problems of carbon pipelines in the state. So we held a lobby day already, and it was our first one. We had over 100 Iowans from across the state show up to the Capitol, and we had an incredibly successful day lobbying. We talked to over 30 legislators, which is really hard to do. As many of you know, if you've been up to the Capitol, sometimes you'll go up there, spend 4 hours, and only talk to 3 or 4. So we know that this is a priority. And when it passed out of the House Judiciary Subcommittee, it passed with 2 votes in favor and 1 vote against. The 2 in favor were Representatives Holt and Thompson, and the 1 against was Representative Wilburn. After that, the bill went through the House Judiciary Committee, and it passed with 19 yes votes and 2 no votes. And you can see the pictures and who voted yes and no. The 2 no's were Representative Rick Olson and Representative Ross Wilburn. And then just Wednesday of this week, it went to the full House floor. Now, compared to last year, we had a bill, House File 943, which is very similar to our bill this year, and it passed out of the Iowa House with 82 yes votes. This year, however, our bill, House File 2104, passed with only 64 yes votes. So we had 14 Democrats flip and 2 Republicans flipped. And these big reasons were jobs, 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 and ethanol. 8 were absent or not voting. So what changed? There was lots of propaganda around jobs and ethanol. We were hearing things like, we need these pipelines to create jobs. But we strongly believe that Iowa should create jobs that are good for our communities, not harmful. We know that carbon pipelines squander our water, they waste our tax dollars. When the CO2 is used to extract more oil out of the ground, it's not a climate solution, and they're incredibly dangerous. We need to have jobs that are good for our communities, not harmful. And then we have to remember that most pipeline jobs like this likely won't be Iowa workers. They usually hire out-of-state workers. And we know from the last 4 years that most of Summit's land agents and surveyors have not been from Iowa. The other thing we're hearing about is this ethanol and economic development. And they're saying if we don't build these pipelines, we're going to have another farm crisis and ethanol is going to fail and farmers are going to be out of business. We need to remind people that the sky is not falling. We hear this from the ethanol industry every single year. If we don't get this mandate or this subsidy or whatever, that ethanol will be destroyed. Iowa will not have another farm crisis if these pipelines are not built. Now, we also have stuff coming out of the Senate. The Senate has introduced a bill, Senate File 2067, and this was introduced by Senate Majority Leader Klemesh, and his proposal would widen the corridor to 10 miles, 5 miles on either side of the preferred route. Now, the purpose of the corridor is to notify people that a project is proposing in their area and that they could be subject to eminent domain. That's a pretty simple concept is you have to pick an area where you may route your pipeline, and all of the people in that area must know that the project is being proposed, that they're asking for the right of the eminent domain, and what your rights are throughout that process. Having a wider corridor does not address the issue of property rights at all. It actually increases the number of people that are targeted with eminent domain. Our bill, House File 2104, is the only one that actually gives a landowner the ability to say no. We also know that Summit's not willing to make adjustments in their route. We saw that with the Phase 1 Iowa Utilities Commission hearings. Many landowners submitted alternate route proposals in their testimonies, and Summit did not accept those. It's expensive, it's time consuming. It's not something that a pipeline company wants to do. And so having a wider corridor does not mean that they're actually going to use a wider corridor. This whole idea coming out of the Senate is just a solution in search of a problem. It's a distraction. We need to keep our focus on House File 2104. We've also heard some other things at the Capitol that kind of change, what we're talking about when we talk about carbon pipelines. Because at our lobby day that we had, for the first time, Bruce Rassetter, who's one of the founders of Summit Carbon Solutions himself, was at the Capitol lobbying. And he himself, as well as his lobbyists and many senators, are outright admitting that Summit's going to use the CO2 for enhanced oil recovery, EOR. That means they're going to use the CO2 to pump more oil from the ground to be burned. This is not a climate solution. We've heard from the beginning that, we believed from the beginning that Summit was going to do enhanced oil recovery, and Summit denied it until now. Capturing CO2 from ethanol plants in Iowa and using it to pump and burn more oil from the ground is simply not a climate solution. And when the topic of jobs, like we said earlier, just like Dakota Access, Summit's surveyors and land agents have been from out of state. And just like Dakota Access, if Summit's allowed to build, we expect most of the workers to come from out of state. So we need your help. We need people to take action and make sure that this bill gets passed out of the Senate and that we have as much support as possible and that we are combating the propaganda coming from the carbon pipeline industry. So please contact your senator and ask them to support House File 2104. You can use any of the talking points that you heard today throughout the presentation. You can simply just ask them to support the bill, up to you, but we really need you to reach out, email them, call them. You can even come talk to them in person next week with us at the Capitol. Our next lobby day is Wednesday, January 28th from 1 to 3 p.m. We're going to meet in the cafeteria. So please join us there and we can talk to them in person. And the other option you have to get a hold of your senators is to attend legislative forums this weekend. Ask legislators to support House File 2104 and not to buy into any of the propaganda coming from Summit and the carbon pipeline industry. Now, here are some of the forums that we found this weekend, and there could be more. And if you know of another one that's not on our list, please post that in the comments so we can add it to the list. But if you are in any of these areas, Davenport, Waterloo, Eldridge, Fort Dodge, Oskaloosa, Carroll, Logan, Clarinda, Sioux City, or Johnston, we need you to show up at those legislative forums this weekend. Here are the dates, here are the times, here are the locations, and please show up and ask them to support House File 2104. So if you have any questions, please put those in the chat and we will get to them later in the day. And we appreciate you watching our Lunch and Learn. We hope that you are staying warm during this dangerously cold weather, and we will see you next Friday at noon. Thank you. Bye.